Malcolm X, the minister of the Black Muslim community in New York and national representative of Elijah Muhammad, the spiritual leader of the Black Muslim movement. Mr. Malcolm, may I ask you to tell us something about the Black Muslim movement in America? What is it? What does it stand for?
Well, it's number one, it primarily is a religious movement here in America that's designed to reform the black man, or the so-called Negroes, reform us morally, and enable us to stand on our own 2 feet and do something for ourselves. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, our religious leader, teaches us the importance of doing something for ourselves now, rather than trying to continue to force ourselves into the white community or upon the white man. He teaches us that if we would do something for ourselves, clean up ourselves, morally, intellectually, and otherwise, and then try and do something for ourselves economically, we would be recognized and accepted by others. But as long as we try and force ourselves in upon others now without having done nothing to prove that we are on any kind of equal basis with them, there will always be this race tension and race problem.
When you say force yourselves upon others, upon the white community, how exactly do you mean that?
Well, any form of integration, forced integration, any effort to force integration upon whites is actually hypocritical. There's a form of hypocrisy involved. If a white man puts his arm around me voluntarily, that's brotherhood. But if you hold a gun on him and make him embrace me and pretend to be friendly or brotherly toward me, then that's not brotherhood, that's hypocrisy. And what America is trying to do is pass laws to force whites to pretend that they want Negroes into their schools or in their places of employment. Well, this is hypocrisy, and this makes a worse relationship between black and white, rather than if this could be brought about on a voluntary basis. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says that what should happen is the black man himself should learn how to develop himself in the same sense that the white man has developed himself. Then they can both come together and recognize each other as equals.
The longest problem in American history has always been the problems of race relations. It's our longest issue. It's been a problem for our culture since the beginning, and it still is today. And you know, there's people from all over the world who live here, but the most consistent has always been whites and blacks.
Separation. The fact that he's the last hired and the first fired is an economic separation. Only in this form of separation, the black man is exploited. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad says that we should be separate, all right, but in this separate state or separate existence, the black man should be given the opportunity and the incentive to do for himself what the white man has done for himself. If you have an all-white neighborhood, you don't call it a segregated neighborhood, but you call an all-black neighborhood a segregated neighborhood. Why? Because the segregated neighborhood is the one that's controlled from the outside by others. But a separate neighborhood is a neighborhood that is independent, it's equal, it can stand on its own 2 feet, such as the white neighborhood. It's an independent, free neighborhood, free community. They're not trying to force themselves upon anyone, socially or otherwise. But the Negro neighborhood, which is inferior, is begging for a chance to integrate itself into that which is superior, which is not going to happen. It's going to cause trouble.
Well, in other words, then you think the Negro has first to raise himself to a status of equality with the white community.
Yes.
Now, what happens, assuming that he can do that? Would you then be in favor of integration, let's say, in the schools or any place else?
When you are equal with another person, the problem of integration doesn't even arise. It doesn't come up. The Chinese in this country aren't asking for integration. The Japanese aren't asking for integration. The only minority in America that's asking for integration is the so-called Negro, primarily because he is inferior, not inherently inferior, but he's economically, socially, politically inferior, and this exists because he has never tried to stand on his own 2 feet and do something for himself. He has filled the role of a beggar.
Now, this topic is pretty sensitive. It makes people uncomfortable. But any problem in life is like that. It is uncomfortable to look at problems, look yourself in the mirror, be honest and open with other people and yourself. But problems don't get solved if you don't do that. If you don't look at them honestly, they won't get solved. And they'll continue for another 200 years if we don't do anything about it. If we're not honest and we don't talk openly and discuss these issues. And so that's what I'm trying to do in this video, to look at the race relations and try and put forth a solution. Now, obviously, I'm a Republican, so I'm of the opinion that the Democrats are way worse for race relations and bettering those race relations than the Republicans by far. And I personally do not believe that opinions have merit just because you have them. You have to prove those opinions. So that's what I'm going to try and do. Now, if you look at the civil rights movement, there's really two figures. There's Malcolm X, and then you have Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was obviously very pro-integration. However, he was pro-integration because he was a Christian. He was a preacher. I believe he was a Southern Baptist preacher. So his ideas of integration are not really his ideas. They're Jesus's ideas. They are Christian values. You know, in Christianity, everybody is a child of God. And so there's really no difference there.
Sit around here trying to pray to the white man's God and go to the white man's church and into the white man's school. We'll be brainwashed by the white man's educational system, and we'll continue to look down upon ourselves, and we'll continue to be a beggar to him because we'll continue to think that he's superior to us. Instead of the Negro leaders having the black man begging for a chance to dine in white restaurants, the Negro leader should be showing the black man how to do something to strengthen his own economy, to give himself an independent economy, or to provide job opportunities for himself, not begging for a cup of coffee in a white man's restaurant.
Dr. King's goals are quite different from yours. He believes in integration, complete integration of society.
Well, that's where Dr. King is mixed up. His goal should be the solution of the problem of the black man in America. Now, not integration. Integration is the method toward obtaining that goal. And what the Negro leader has done is gotten himself wrapped up in the method and has forgotten what the goal is. The goal is the dignity of the black man in America. He wants respect as a human being. He wants recognition as a human being. Now, if integration will get him that, all right. If segregation will get him that, all right. If separation will get him that, all right. But after he gets integration and he still doesn't have this dignity and this recognition as a human being, then his problem is still not solved.
Well, isn't this exactly what Dr. King is looking towards, and that is the day when the Negro will be treated with dignity? Wasn't this, after all, the result of the Montgomery bus boycott?
No, because I don't think you can, having an opportunity to ride either on the front or the back or in the middle of someone else's bus doesn't dignify you. When you have your own bus, then you have dignity. When you have your own school, you have dignity. When you have your own country, you have dignity. When you have something of your own, you have dignity. But whenever you are begging for a chance to participate in that which belongs to someone else, or use that which belongs to someone else on an equal basis with the owner, that's not dignity, that's ignorance.
This is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to be a Christian. However, I do find it very hypocritical of leftists who will consistently talk shit on Christianity, and then when January 12th or whatever it is rolls around, suddenly Martin Luther King is like the greatest person in the world. And you can't hold those two ideas. You can't blame the church and blame Christianity for everything, and then here's this one preacher who, is like their savior. Why would that be? Why would you change your opinion just because someone is of a different skin color? That is racism. Like, if you hold a white person if you say a white person is wrong or evil for being religious, then you should hold that same opinion for a black person. Just because Martin Luther King is black doesn't mean that now all of a sudden, Christianity is the greatest idea ever. They do this obviously from social pressure because they're told that, they grow up in an environment and a culture that reinforces that, and they're not the type of people to think for themselves and go against the grain, whether that's good or bad. So, in my opinion, the only people who can truly embrace Martin Luther King are Christians. And so, if you're going to church regularly and you believe in Christ and you think he's your savior and that, you know, he brings salvation to mankind, then yeah, you can celebrate Martin Luther King Day. And if you're not living a Christian lifestyle, then you're not in alignment with what Martin Luther King was preaching. Now, me personally, I am not a Christian. I don't hate Christianity like a lot of people do. I am a religious person. I do believe in like a higher power and all that. I am actually a heathen. This is Thor's hammer. It's a Mjolnir pendant. I am a Viking. And I plan on actually doing like a separate channel for just that. So if you're interested in that, you know, stay tuned. And I will post, you know, I'll post an update on that and I'll have a whole separate channel for that. Because it's not every day you hear someone tell you that they believe in Odin.
Well, how can a minority group in this country so-called stand on its own 2 feet?
Well, I can give you this example by explaining the difference between segregation and separation. Segregation is that which is forced upon an inferior by a superior. Separation is done voluntarily by 2 equals. If I have children and they live in my house, I care for them, they're dependent upon me. And their dependence upon me puts me in a position to regulate their lives, control their lives, tell them where to go, where they can't go. That's a form of segregation. But when those children become of age and they think they're equal with me, they leave my home. And when they leave my home and begin to set up a home for themselves, provide clothing, food, and shelter for themselves, that makes them independent of me. It puts them out of my jurisdiction. The fact that they can do for themselves that which I have done for myself makes me have to recognize that they are equals with me. And now, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says that the black man in America, for the past 400 years, has been like a boy in the white man's house, begging the white man for a job, for food, clothing, and shelter. And then after the white man provides him with all of these things, he turns around and has the nerve to get angry at the white man when the white man tries to control his life.
Now, segregation is a result of force. And so it is both immoral and unconstitutional to force 2 people to be apart. But it is also counterintuitively immoral and unconstitutional to force 2 people who don't want to hang out to hang out. You have the right to be separate. And so I agree with Malcolm X that separation is better. It's better rationally, it's better morally, and it's better politically. And it would lead to a peaceful existence within the states. Now, of course, leftists are not interested in peace or reason. They're interested in forcing their opinions and their feelings upon other people, regardless of the outcome.
But being friendly and being a friend, I think, are 2 different things. I think there are many whites who act friendly toward Negroes. A fox acts friendly toward the lamb. And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate. The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chop in his plate.
I'd like to point out, though, that
I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
So for starters, I believe it is the better choice politically. When you think of the phrase e pluribus unum, out of many one, there can't be a pluribus if there's not a pluribus. If you don't have the right to be separate, then there can't be many. There can only be one. And that's actually something we see in communism. There is no difference between people. we're just one mass, and that's not the case. We're different groups, and I know in Republican circles the word collective does not get received very well, but we are all a part of different groups. You know, that's the whole point of federalism. A foetus is a treaty. We come together with agreements, and I think it's just rationally and morally better too. I feel like a lot of people, white, black, Asian, Spanish, Native American, whatever, I think that Malcolm X's ideas would resonate with the subconscious. We just don't admit it because we have social pressure trying to force us into integration and be everybody's friend, and you can't say things that are offensive, and you can't hurt people's feelings, and this, that, and the third.
Except in the Newsweek poll, they used Negro interviewers.
You'll find that oftentimes Negroes are as much on guard around Negro interviewers, who usually represent the bourgeois element of Negroes, as they are on guard around whites. Usually Negroes know that when this bourgeois Negro walks through the door, he is not doing something that he's initiated himself, but he's involved in something in which the white man is the absolute author of and has sent him to the Negro community for some information. And when they give that Negro some information, usually they give him the information that they want him to take back to the white man, because that's who he's going to take it back to.
But I do believe that people should have the right to choose. And you can always say that like it's really petty and ignorant not to want to hang out with another race, and that's fair, but you have the right to be petty and ignorant. The government can't force that. The government cannot force the opposite upon you. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is actually more of a fairy tale we tell children, because the Declaration of Independence is not a legally binding document. The Constitution says that you have the right to life, liberty, and property. And it says that in Article 1, it says that in the Fourth Amendment, and it says that, the Fifth Amendment, not the Fourth Amendment. It says that in the Fifth Amendment, and it says that in the 14th Amendment. And 13, 14, and 15th Amendments are all the Civil War amendments. So it specifically says that you have the right to life, liberty, and property, not feelings. The government is not in any place to force feelings or moderate feelings in any way. So let's say, for instance, like a doctor or someone who provides a necessary service or good cannot refuse you service if they violate your life, liberty, and property. So a doctor can't say like, oh, I don't want to operate on this person because he's black, he's white, she's a woman, he's gay, whatever. The government is there to enforce your right to life, liberty, and property. Now, let's say I go into a restaurant and that restaurant is owned by black people and they don't want to sell their product to white people. The government's in no position to tell them that they have to sell that to me. Same with like a Christian baker is not in any place to be forced to sell a cake for a gay wedding. That's not the government's place. The free market will determine that. Why would that black restaurant sell me food? Because I have money, and green is the color that really matters. If you're a gay couple and you're looking for a wedding cake, there's plenty of other shops that will sell you a cake. That's the free market. Business owners want money. They're not really out there to make a political statement or a philosophical statement. It also would allow an environment where two groups are not dependent upon each other. If you are separate and you have your own jobs, your own way of life, your own culture, you can be independent from someone else, right? You're undependent upon them.
If you're interested in freedom, you need some judo, you need some karate, you need all the things that will help you fight for freedom.
Nationalism is the wave of the present and the future. It is nationalism that's bringing freedom to oppressed people all over the world. It was nationalism that brought freedom to the Algerians. It was nationalism that brought freedom to the Nigerians and to the Ghanaians. It was nationalism that brought freedom to the people of Uganda and Tanganyika and Sudan and Somaliland. The Africans didn't get it by sitting in. They didn't get it by waiting in. They didn't get it by singing "We Shall Overcome." They got it through nationalism.
Now, as Malcolm X stated, there's only two things you need to be free, to be independent. That is a means to defend yourself and a sense of nationalism. What party constantly insists that you don't have the right to defend yourself and you don't have the right to nationalism? It's the Democrats. So if Malcolm X is correct, then it's the Democrats who are trying to take away your independence. I don't want anybody to misunderstand or construe that being pro-separation is the same as being anti-integration, which it's not. It's just saying that integration must be freely chosen. It cannot be forced by the government or the media or anybody else. It needs to be freely chosen between two individuals. Much like in the same way, a man cannot be peaceful if he is not capable of violence, because he didn't actually choose peace. He was forced into peace. And so he's not really peaceful, he's helpless. And so in the same way, if two individuals do not have the right to be separate and they can't choose separation, then they're not actually choosing integration, right? It's like Malcolm X said, if a white man puts his arm around me and embraces me in brotherhood, then you have integration. If you put a gun to his head and force him to embrace me, he will just pretend to be my friend. And that's a very good quote. And what it's done, in my opinion, is it's made white people deceitful and secretly resentful, while at the same time it's turned black people into beggars who are constantly seeking this approval and this false notion of integration, because it's not really coming from freedom. It's not really a dignified position. It's one of force.
Among whites here in America, the political teams are no longer divided into Democrats and Republicans. The whites who are now struggling for control of the American political throne are divided into liberal and conservative camps. The white liberals from both parties cross party lines to work together toward the same goal. And white conservatives from both parties do likewise. The white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful, more hypocritical than the conservative. Both want power, but the white liberal is the one who has perfected the art of posing as the Negro's friend and benefactor. And by winning the friendship and support of the Negro, the white liberal is able to use the Negro as a pawn or a weapon in this political football game that is constantly raging between the white liberals and the white conservatives. The American Negro is nothing but a political football, and the white liberals control this ball through tricks or tokenism, false promises of integration and civil rights. In this game of deceiving and using the American Negro, the white liberals have complete cooperation of the Negro civil rights leaders, who sell our people out for a few crumbs of token recognition, token gains, token progress.
And the most consistent medium of choosing integration is business. It's capitalism, it's the free market, it's the willingness to do business and exchange goods, services, and ideas freely, and to enter into contracts with people, with both parties having the free will and the volition to do so. Now, when you look at the political landscape, what group is against capitalism? It's leftist, it's communist. And so it has been business which has been the best catalyst for racial integration, and we see that everywhere, not just in our country, in foreign countries, and also amongst like different races. It's trade that brings people together, and it is trade which allows cultures to be freely exchanged with. And the liberal media plays its part, but also the liberal schools play their part. They teach history very slanted and in a way that creates a master slave dynamic in people's minds. Because, there is no law or anything that you can point to that is oppressive. The notion of oppression in America happens in the mind, and that starts from school. And so what happens is black people see themselves as victims throughout their whole life. They see themselves as slaves in a system that they can't flourish in. Whereas white people see themselves as the overlords of everything, and their entire view of history is just that white people walk in someplace and everybody just falls down and, bows to us. And it's just a fallacious view of history. The school acts like history just came into existence in the 1500s and like nothing else happened before that. They don't teach black history. They don't teach anybody's history. When I took world history, it was just European history. It was modern European history. And the world has way more to offer. And, I think everybody should read world history generally. But in this case, I feel like black people don't really take an interest in black history. Like, I don't think anybody really knows about, like, the Kingdom of Kush, which was a contemporary of the Egyptian Empire. They were at the southern border during the Bronze Age, and they actually occupied Egypt for a little while. The 25th or 26th dynasty, founded by King Pi. They think Egypt's black. Egyptians were not black. They were a mixed race. If you look at Egypt, there were a lot of cultures like Greeks, Canaanites, Africans, of course. The richest person in history was Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire on the western coast of Africa. And that was during the 14th century. And if you were to look at Europe in the 14th century, we were all dying from the plague. The Black Plague, which we got from Mongolians. And at the same time, you have the Ottoman slave raids in Europe. So in Iceland, they're called the Turkic abductions. But the Ottoman Empire actually made it all the way up to Iceland and actually kidnapped white slaves, took them to the northern coast of Africa, the Barbary Coast, and then sold them to slavery in the Ottoman Empire. White women in particular were sold into harems. So the idea of inherited trauma from slavery, like you are somehow in an inherently inferior position and unable to better your conditions because you were once slaves, doesn't make sense. Well, first of all, that's the plot to Assassin's Creed, the idea that you inherit your ancestors' memories. But also it doesn't make sense because if you look at the time period of the African slave trade, then why didn't the Africans have inherited entrepreneurship from Mansa Musa and the Mali Empire? But also, why didn't the whites have inherited trauma from their enslavement by the Ottoman Empire? It just doesn't make sense. It's more victimhood that is pushed by the schools and the media to keep people in general, but particularly black people, in not a poor condition, but a servile condition. Because they don't care that you have money. It's that you're not investing your money wisely. You're not investing it in a positive way. And you are impoverished in your mind. You are enslaved in your mind.
If white immigrants can come to this country 50 years ago with nickels and dimes and no education, can come here and pool their little nickels and dimes and no education, and set up little stores, develop these stores into larger stores, develop this into an industry which creates job opportunities for whites. Since Lincoln was supposed to have freed the black man 100 years ago, And today the black man, according to the government economist, has spending power of $20 billion per year. We feel that with the black man spending $20 billion a year, not setting up any businesses, not creating any industry, not creating any job opportunities for his own kind, he's not in a moral position to point the finger today at the white man and tell the white man that he's discriminating against him for not giving him a job in factories that he himself set up. If the black man has $20 billion, and these so-called Negro leaders are such geniuses that they can integrate white restaurants and integrate white factories and force themselves into that which the white man has set up, they should use this same ingenuity to show the black people how to pool our wealth and set up something of our own. And then we won't have to force our way into his anymore. One more thing I would like to point out concerning what he said about 125th Street. We don't waste our time on 125th Street, but you can reach more people in the street who want to change than you can in the bourgeoisie society, the bourgeoisie church, and the bourgeoisie circles. Our program is directed toward the man in the street. So we spend our time in the street, and what we do with that man, instead of trying to change the white man in your mind, make you accept us, we change the mind of the black man and make him accept himself. And as soon as he accepts himself, he'll solve his own problem. He won't be trying to force himself into your factory and into your bedroom and into your kitchen.
And I'm going to plug a future video here, but another thing that black people don't know is that they've already gotten their reparations. The country of Liberia on the western coast of Africa was created for black slaves. The idea was first, I don't know if he proposed it, but President James Monroe was a supporter of the idea, our 5th president. And the capital of Liberia is named Monrovia after him. And after the Civil War, many newly emancipated slaves from the South and also the Caribbean actually went to Liberia. Liberia is your reparations. Like, if you want your reparations that bad, they're there. You know, you can buy a plane ticket and you can go. But that kind of bullshit is pushed by black liberals, and just like white liberals, they're not interested in a solution. They just want to bitch and be negative and force their negativity onto others. Because if you're watching this video and you're black and you think you are entitled to reparations, you have them. You just have to claim it. You have to claim your reparations and go to Liberia. It's there. And speaking of James Monroe, the schools and the media also don't teach the presidents. And I feel like I don't want to get off topic and make in this video and make it longer than it needs to be. So I'll probably make another video about all the presidents and their race relations. So if you're interested in that, you should subscribe and get notified. But I'll give you one example. Someone like Rutherford B. Hayes, who is a Republican. He actually fought, well, before the Civil War, he was a lawyer. And he represented a lot of black slaves who escaped the South into the North. I believe he was from Ohio. And then he fought in the Civil War. And he got 5 Purple Hearts. And, you know, they don't just give you a Purple Heart. Now, as president, he won the election by 1 electoral vote. And the loser was Democrat Samuel Tilden, and they were going to fight the election unless the Republicans cut off reparation funding. Now, if you just showed his picture and his name to a lot of people and you were like, oh, here's this Republican named Rutherford, most people would think he was racist because he's a white guy named Rutherford. And so he's not invited to the cookout, this internet myth that exists in the minds of white liberals, because that is their utopia. Their utopia is black people cooking them food. That's their idea of racial integration. The black cookout. I'm invited to the cookout. And if you look at the history of the Republican Party from day one to now, black conservatives have had a much better place in the party, and black conservatives in general have had a better success. in society. Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, Malcolm, Martin Luther King was a Southern Baptist preacher, and so if you were a Christian preacher, you were most likely to vote Republican. Malcolm X was a convict, and so he couldn't vote. He went in jail for Grand Theft Auto, I think, but as you can tell by all these clips, he does not like Democrats, and I've never seen a clip of him talking about white conservatives or white Republicans, except contrasting them to the Democrats. And if you look at today's political landscape, you got Candace Owens, Alan West, Thomas Sowell, Brandon Tatum. You got YouTubers like Big Herc. I love Fresh Out. It's a great series. You should go check it out if you've never seen it. These people are also way more conservative and are Republicans. They just are. Whereas black liberals, they're just like white liberals. They're very emotional. They blame everybody for their problems. They're not capable of debating their ideas. They don't have proof for their ideas. And, they'll just say shit like, well, we need to own up to slavery. And it's like, well, we did. That's why we taught it to you in the 3rd grade. If your only concept of American history revolves around slavery, then you have obviously not advanced since 3rd grade. And 3rd grade level ideas are not what this country needs to move forward.
Whenever it takes a stoppage of something that's going to affect the white man, you find the white liberal absent. But when it involves something that primarily will affect the best interests of black people, and black people only, then that white liberal is present. Herbert Hill is the labor secretary for the NAACP. And if he was interested in black people, he would prepare a black man with the type of knowledge and understanding of the labor troubles involving black people that would enable a black man to sit in the same position as Secretary of Labor or Labor Secretary in the NAACP. I'm suspicious of whites who join Negroes and always have to be in the lead, who always have to be the head, who always have to be at the top in Negro organizations. Those whites who really have the interest of blacks at heart, let them give some advice to some Negroes and stand on the sideline. But don't join the organization and then get at the head of it and pose as a friend of Negroes.
Another president who does not get enough credit for his policies on race would be Republican Dwight D. Eisenhower. And I do not know why the 50s are considered this racist time when Dwight D. Eisenhower was the one who beat Hitler. Okay, he was the supreme commander of Allied forces. He planned D-Day. You'd think like that right there would make you a champion of, racial integration and all that. But no, because he was Republican, and so, beating Hitler isn't fucking good enough. Now, he was very Christian, and so just like MLK, he did not see people as defined by their racial makeup. That is not a very Christian perspective. In Christianity, we are all children of God. And another thing that Dwight D. Eisenhower did when he was president was he signed the first Civil Rights Act, which integrated the school systems. So Little Rock 9 took place under the presidency of Eisenhower. So the Democrats were pro-slavery, so that was the first civil rights, they were on the pro-slavery side during the Civil War, and then they opposed the Civil Rights Act integrating school systems, and then they finally, acquiesced during what we call the Civil Rights Movement, and they did so very deceitfully. Now, I personally have 2 black friends who are very close to me. We've been friends for over 10 years. And sometimes I tell this to white people, and they're like, you only have two black friends? And it's like, yeah, bro, like, they're not Pokemon. I'm not trying to collect them all. I'm not trying to collect as many black people as I can and show them off to white people like they're trophies of my virtue. And I think that that's how a lot of white liberals view integration. I think that they have a master-slave dynamic in their mind. And in their mind, they won't admit it because it's subconscious. Like, leftists are not very self-reflective, right? They just kind of go with things. They go with what they're told. And I think that they have this mentality that they need to collect black people and show them off. And it's fucking weird. And I'm pretty sure that black people don't like that. So in conclusion, I believe that the best way moving forward to finally solve the race issue is for black people and white people to become Republicans, to embrace federalism, and to save the republic, and to hold these values and to teach these values to younger generations and reject this parasitic ideology of leftism.
You're the one who put the present Democratic administration in Washington, D.C. The whites were evenly divided. It was the fact that you threw 80% of your votes behind the Democrats that put the Democrats in the White House. When you see this, you can see that the Negro vote is the key factor. And despite the fact that you are in a position to be the determining factor, what do you get out of it? The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. They've been down there 4 years. And all other legislation they wanted to bring up, they brought it up and gotten it out of the way, and now they bring up you. And now they bring up you. You put them first, and they put you last. Because you're a chump. A political chump. In Washington, D.C., in the House of Representatives, there are 257 who are Democrats. Only 177 are Republicans. In the Senate, there are 67 Democrats. Only 33 are Republicans. The party that you backed controls 2/3 of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and still they can't keep their promise to you, because you're a chump. Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.